So if you can kind of anticipate those needs and those feelings before time, it kind of keeps the emotions, down here so we can think with our rational brain and not, out of chaos and, whatever might happen when you get crazy news in real estate.
My name is Kevin McIntosh, and this is The Closing Table, where we talk to experts about their experience in real estate all across the country. Let's go. Good morning and welcome back to The Closing Table. My name is Kevin C. McIntosh, your host, and we have the pleasure today of talking to another top producing real estate agent representing her market. We want to welcome Kasey Heimbecker. How are you, Kasey?
Hey, Kevin, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And like we always like to say to our guests, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us here on The Closing Table. So we are going to get into the nitty gritty of the business and talk about real estate specifically in your market through your experience. But first, I have an icebreaker for you, Kasey. It's called fill in the blank. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Sentences that are incomplete. I need you to fill those in with context that makes sense based off your experience. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, let's do this, Kasey. First one. In 10 years, the real estate industry will be blank.
That's an excellent question. My guess is it's going to be growing at the same rate it kind of has been, 2 to 5% on average. It's too hard to say, what interest rates will be or if it's going to be a buyer's market or a seller's market. It's just kind of all at the whim of the world around us. So I imagine, though, with the housing shortage we have, that we'll probably still be quite busy and probably still trying to meet the demand that the buyers have right now. We just need more houses. So I don't think that's going to fix in 10 years, potentially, but probably not.
Wow. Okay. Great insight. Love that perspective. Let's keep going. Blank is how you add value to your home.
Oh, geez. Maintenance is the first thing that came to mind. Average maintenance, keeping things, up to date. And I don't mean like, remodels so everything's modern and new and fresh. I mean, just
fixing light bulbs.
Yeah.
Right.
So, make sure your systems are working, replace things that need replacing. Don't wait until they break. It saves you money and it just makes your house more marketable and easier to sell in the long run, especially when people can see it's been taken care of very well.
Nice. Next one. A common obstacle to obtaining a home is?
A couple of things. It can be something as simple as not being able to get pre-approved based on work history. Maybe you're self-employed. Obstacle, obviously, it can be worked around, but so I would say those things are things I'm seeing right now. Right now, also with the interest rates being a little higher than they were a couple of years ago, it's kind of pushed some people not necessarily out of the market, but they can't quite buy at the range they would like to buy. So they're kind of holding off and just trying to see how things develop. But those seem to be the biggest obstacles, and just the housing shortage, like we already talked about.
Okay. Last one. My real estate market is mostly affected by blank.
Probably we're in a more rural area. We do a lot of, we're in Kent County and Montcalm County, all of West Michigan, but like in Montcalm County and those types of areas, they're more rural. So we don't have as many houses hitting the market on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis as we do in the more populated areas. So that's a pretty big hurdle. Something that, someone who might be buying in a more populated area of Grand Rapids where there's a little higher turnover, they might be able to pretty easily get into a house within a month or two. Whereas out here, we might wait 2, 3, 4 months just to see a handful of houses that meet criteria. So that's probably the biggest obstacle out here. It's doable. It just slows the timeline down a little bit.
Right. And I completely understand that when you put it in perspective. It's not like when you go to the rural country areas, there's houses next door to each other, driveways. We're talking about homes and properties with acres of land and, spaces in between
Yes.
each other. So I
Yeah.
completely understand that. Well, thank you, Kasey, for providing that insight for us and starting off our icebreaker. We are going to get into your market and everything like that more specifically. But before we do that, let's take some time to get to know you a little bit better as a human, Kasey. If you can, in 60 seconds or less, tell us who you are outside of real estate.
I mean, I'm a wife, mom, sister, and that takes up the majority of my life. We like to travel. We have a motorhome, so we'll get together mostly throughout the summer, travel around, meet up with groups of friends and family, and just check out different areas, mostly in the state, and relax, try to just disconnect a
Mhm.
little bit. And other than that, I mean, I have 4 kids. 2 are out of the house already. 2 are at home still, but they keep us busy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Nice. Mobile home, you say, huh? Oh, I know that has to be interesting. I would probably never be at my actual house. I would be everywhere,
yeah,
especially during the summer. Everywhere. Oh, man, that got to be exciting. Nice to hear.
it's fun.
Nice to hear. All right, let's talk about where you do your business. All right, so I want you to describe your current market twofold. One, geographically, give as much details to the area, other notable cities nearby, notable landmarks, attractions. Then let's get into some of the economics, real estate wise. Any statistics, numbers, pricing, things of that nature you can share.
So our closest large-ish market is probably Greenville, Michigan. Our office is in Gowan, it's just a hair north of Greenville, Greenville school districts, regardless. So Greenville it's a big small town. So they have a lot of amenities, a good school system, lots of different elementaries and things that parents can choose from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as attractions go, there's not an awful lot of them. We got a brand new, old bowling alley, freshly redone. So that's kind of been like the buzz in town lately. Everyone's excited to have a new hot spot to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Other than that, it's your basic rural town. Yeah, lots of restaurants, shopping, that kind of thing.
All right.
But for the most part, people who have like a big shopping list, back to school shopping, they're going to go buy things for their home. They're going to Grand Rapids still. So we're
Okay.
25, 30 minutes outside of Grand Rapids, um, about 35 minutes south of Big Rapids. So pretty centrally located, easy access to 131. You can go north, you can go south. So a lot of people like the convenience of the location. And so many people are moving here right now, and it just seems like the people who have lived here their whole life really aren't leaving. So it's
Yeah.
got to be a pretty good place to be.
Hmm. See, one thing, I spent a little bit of my life in small towns like South Haven, Bangor, Covert, and then I spent a significant portion of my life in growing up in the bigger cities, Detroit, Kalamazoo, and things of that nature. And one thing I will say, as I get older, I start to appreciate the nuances of small towns. The one thing I see in smaller towns is the community. When you say community, it's small towns. People
Mhm.
know each other, they look out for each other, and they literally support small business because the small businesses literally keep that town thriving. So that's
100%.
what I will say about small towns that I personally like, and I'm starting to appreciate more as I get older. When I was smaller, I was like, "There's nothing to do here. I don't want to be here at all." But
Yeah.
and I'm older, I'm like, I want my peace. I don't want to be too close to people. Like I can see that. So I want to highlight that about small towns and what I appreciate in it. So that's great to hear. What about numbers, economics wise with real estate? What's the pricing, houses market and time on the market and things like that looking?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's varied like everywhere. I looked at some stats this morning just to kind of see what they were showing versus what I see and experience. And it looks like in the Greenville area, they have the average home sales price at 250, which initially I thought was pretty low. But when I got in and kind of looked at what's on the market right now, it backs up basically what we see. If you want to
Mm,
live in town, a first time starter home, you're going to be able to purchase that probably around $200,000 in town, a small lot, maybe a little garage, that type of thing. But
okay.
anything that is outside of city limits is generally selling more in like the 265, 340 price range. your standard typical ranch, maybe a bi-level for 240 type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, it's kind of all over the place. It's hard to look at the stats in a rural area and be able to see exactly what they mean. But I feel like in our experience, we're seeing most a ranch style house, maybe an acre or two with a garage and that sort of thing. It's going to be 275, 300, but starting right about
Okay.
265 up to 340, depending on amenities.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. Yeah. Actually seems about kind of average around Michigan, kind of, sort
Yeah.
of, in
Yeah.
a
It's
way,
real close to like Cedar Springs, a little less than Cedar, probably a little more than Belding,
Uh-huh.
um, maybe a little more than Ionia, but it's
Mm.
still a little cheaper than more like Rockford or, areas out that way,
Yeah,
Comstock
yeah.
Park. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. You're still gonna find your, areas where it's gonna be priced, fairly high. But then for the most part, I would say a lot of areas in Michigan compared to the national average is doing pretty good. It's doing
yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah.
I've
We're not
heard
over
markets.
400.
Yeah, I've heard markets where average is five, six
Yeah.
hundred thousand. And
Yep.
come on, let's take what we got. Okay, well that's good to hear. Give us a little bit. That kind of paints the picture for us in your market. All right, when you're doing your job, you see a lot of homes
Hmm.
in these rural areas. I know they come with barns and all different types of amenities and whatnot. I want to talk about your experience going through homes and seeing some crazy things. Can you share a story of one of the weirdest, strangest, oddest things, or something that stood out to you the most throughout your entire career?
Yeah, two came to mind immediately. One was simple. It was just kind of shocking. It was a ginormous basement room in a house, and it was a craft room. But when you walked in, it felt like you were walking into like Michael's or Joanne Fabrics because they
Mm,
literally had everything you could imagine.
nice.
So it was just kind of a shocker, not something you expect to see. It was not a store. They weren't selling anything. It was all personal use, but the way it was all displayed and laid out just was
I like that.
100% felt like you were walking into a craft store. So that was a surprise we didn't see coming. But probably the coolest thing or most off the wall thing I've seen was in a house I sold, I think 2 years ago. It used to be a bank, and there was a full bank vault from the 1800s in the basement.
Oh,
Yeah, so that was pretty different, kind of
oh
exciting, a little
yeah.
scary because everyone's like, "Do I dare go in? Can I
I
get
know,
back
right?
out?"
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of fun. And then later on in the investigation of the house, we discovered that directly above that, because the vault was cemented in, there was no flooring there. It was just cement. So like the whole home was gorgeous wood floor, except for right over the vault, it was cement. And it's just something you didn't expect to see. So
Yeah.
a giant rug covering it, it looked great, but you would never know it was there otherwise. So it
That's
was pretty cool.
crazy. Oh wow. It's so crazy to see what they're turning into homes nowadays. You
Yeah.
said it used to be a bank. I
Yep.
can only imagine it. I'm seeing a lot of churches being
Yes.
transformed into homes. That's a little different for me. I don't
Yeah.
know, like I feel like the energy, there's still an energy in there. Like that's to me
For sure.
personally though. It's still an
Yeah.
energy in there. But but to see, I saw some of these pictures and what people do with the space and the structure and how you can kind of turn it. It's like it's wow. People have a vision for it. You could really turn it into something with
Yeah.
with it being a blank canvas. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
look,
Churches and schools are always fascinating to go through when they're set up as homes. Just pretty cool.
a school would be crazy. I just thought about that. That would be crazy.
Hmm.
Okay, I don't want to get too lost in that. All right, Kasey, let's talk about when a person is reaching out to you, a lead or client, and they say, "Hey, I want to purchase a home. I haven't even talked to a lender." So they clearly need to get pre-approved. Can you describe a time when you helped the client position themselves to get pre-approved for the mortgage process?
Yeah, sure. Because you're exactly right. That's how most people come in. They're like, we want to
Mm-hmm.
buy a house, but we don't know anything about anything. What do we need to
Mm-hmm.
do? Um, and so we get them set up with a lender. Typically, we start by getting to know their needs a little bit. We don't really need to know a lot about their financial information per se, just kind
Right.
of more like what their needs are, maybe what type of employment they have. Do they have a regular W 2 job? Are they self employed? That kind of thing, just to kind of narrow down and get them situated with a lender that will have the best strengths to meet their needs, type of thing. So that's usually where we start. And we have some really good lender relationships who work in a similar fashion to how our team works, like teamwork makes the dream work type of thing. If I'm busy, somebody else will absolutely be here. And just to make sure they know that every step of the way their needs are going to be met. But yeah, we usually get them connected. We like to do a little group text with our lender that we've decided that they would like to try if they don't have their own, that is, and just
Okay.
kind of get everyone connected and acquainted and on the same page. And then the lender will go off and do their thing they need to do with them. We'll take care of the, getting registered and searching for houses and that type of thing. And then just kind of come together. And our lenders are great as far as following up with people who might not be ready to buy yet for whatever reason, whether it's a work history or a credit score, that type of thing. They have a lot of great programs out there to help you know what to do with your money to improve that score as fast as possible, type of thing.
Right.
So yeah, we do a lot of work with them. A
That's
lot of work
good.
with them to get people
That's
set up.
good. I think that's one of those common, I don't want to say misconceptions, but that's one of those situations where it's like a lot of people don't know, should I go to a lender first or a real estate agent? I feel like most people just turn to a real estate agent because it's an actual person rather than an entity. You can actually
Right.
see this person, talk to them, and they're the real estate professional. So you would expect them to walk you through everything, which they do. But from my perspective, I would see it as, I mean, as a real estate agent, I would think, obviously you go to a lender first, right? Get pre-approved. It would make it a little bit easier as a real estate agent, but, still being a professional that you are, you still guide them through that with, lenders that you trust, that you're familiar with, and
Yeah.
things of that nature. So,
Yeah. I mean, there are often times when buyers will come in and they have lenders already.
yeah.
Um, 9 times out of 10, it's their personal lending institution, whether that's their credit union or the bank down the street that they've been at for 20 years. Um, and that's great. We encourage that because obviously we want everyone to work with people they know, like, and trust. It's got to feel good in order to go forward. So, and then there's also times where, we might come across a home where a conventional loan officer at the bank might not be as savvy in terms of finding workarounds for potential hiccups in a purchase.
Mm,
So it's still nice either way to have our own lender relationships, because then if we get in a pickle, we're halfway through a pending transaction and we need to switch gears, we have options for the buyers, and at this point they're usually pretty good in the know, like, and trust department, and they're willing to accept your guidance on, well, hey, there's other financing, there's other loan options. Let's talk to
correct.
somebody else and see how we can work around that. So,
Right, right. I think, and I think that ultimately depends on the lender too, the different programs they'll have available and things of that nature. But just to kind of in that subject, so there aren't any, other than probably the fact that it slows it down a little bit because you have to, help someone get a lender. Are there any other main or significant differences in clients who may have come with you with a pre-approval already with the lender, or someone who needs to get pre-approved, with your assistance? Other than the time thing, there's no real difference. Just want to make.
not really. What I have
Okay.
noticed is when people show up and they already have their lending secured and they're pre-approved, it's usually because they need to make that move now. They're
Okay.
not just on the
Right. Right.
cusp of we're thinking maybe in the next 3 to 6 months we're going to move. They're like, we need to move. I have my lending. Let's go look. So sometimes there's a change in urgency. Other times they're not. Some people are just really prepared and like to, they do the research ahead of time and they know all of the things that they need to do and they do them before they even approach somebody. So
Right.
yeah, but
All right.
really, as far as
Good.
timeline goes, not a big deal. You can get pre-approved in 24 hours. So
That is true. Yeah,
yeah,
I want to clarify that also for our audience, just so they, they are aware, like you said, I think the way you put it is perfect. If you are in a rush, that's probably the best way to go because, you go to the lender, you get pre-approved quickly,
yeah,
then you go to the agent and start looking for homes immediately. So
yep,
thank you for explaining that.
yep,
I saw that you are an LPN also, right? Licensed practical nurse. Did I say that correct?
yep, yep.
Nice, interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
So now you're juggling being an LPN and a licensed real estate professional. Can you share a situation where your nursing skills translated into exceptional care for clients during a real estate transaction?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of feel like there is so much overlap with real estate and healthcare. It was kind of
Really?
shocking in the beginning. Yeah, I know it sounds a little crazy, but um, with healthcare, there's so much documentation that you have to do. You know, you're working on 5, 10 different apps or websites, you know, to get your work done. You're working with a
Hmm.
care team, you know, so you come in to see us and you're going to see me as your nurse. You got your provider, you got someone doing prior auth, someone doing this, you know, someone checking in, right? So you got this group of people that all come together to make sure that your visit it goes as smoothly as possible. And real estate is super similar. You've got 100 different apps you're working out of. You know, you got a million different places that you can resource information. You have a team of people around you who all have a dedicated goal of getting somebody through a transaction as smoothly as possible. So, you know, kind of like your care team on the healthcare side. So, constantly working together, constant communication. Um, and I think that's the biggest thing is communication itself. I think I haven't actively been working as a nurse since 2020.
Okay. Hmm.
But I feel like in the last 3 years with real estate, I've probably used techniques like motivational interviewing more in real estate than I did in the last 20 years in the medical field, just because it's so telling and it's the best way to get clear communication and get to know your client's needs the best. So, you know, a lot of times people come in and they'll be like, well, we need a bigger house. You know, our kitchen's kind of small right now. And, you know, we've kind of like some land, you know, and you kind of just got to give that feedback and be like, so what I'm hearing you saying is, you know, you have 2 bedrooms, you're going to need at least three. Is that right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd probably like four. Okay, perfect. We're going to write four down, you know, and then like, you want some land. Does that mean that you want to be like on 10 acres, you know, in the woods? Or are you okay with something in town that feels private? Okay,
Hmm.
feels private, you know, so you just kind of narrow down and kind of validate their needs, um, and just get that open and clear communication going. And it just sets the tone for the rest of the process. You
Yeah.
know, smooth sailing lets them know that you're listening, you're engaged, you care about their needs,
Correct.
um, and it just kind of brings it all together. The same way if you go in to see your doctor and they're like, hey, everything looks great. Good to see you. See you in a year. And you're like, wait, 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 wait. Like you didn't, I got to tell you about these things.
Right.
Like, hold on,
Right.
you know? So
Hmm.
it's kind of like that. So you just want to make sure that, you know, you're touching all the points and giving them a lot of opportunities to think through things and come up with new things that they might want and just kind of like fully go through that process and kind of understand. But I mean, it's helpful, but honestly, I mean, everybody will look at a bunch of different homes and kind of determine what they don't want more than they want. So it's all a process. But yeah, I think just the communication and setting expectations and understanding truly what they're asking and wanting is probably the biggest and most important thing.
I'm gonna be honest. I didn't see any parallels between the two, but I love how you actually have drawn that the two parallels between the two. You have to ask a lot of questions to really understand what's going on. You
Yeah.
have to in healthcare.
Mhm.
Same thing in real estate. A lot of paperwork involved also.
Yep.
A lot of big dollars involved in these transactions in both healthcare and that. So I can see that now that you say that, and it
Yeah,
makes sense. So I love that
for
you
sure.
you kind of put those two together with that.
I mean,
Now,
the emotional bandwidth that it
mhm.
takes to go through something
Oh yeah.
medically
Oh, good
or to
point too.
buy, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I think you expect it maybe if you're sick,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's going to be hard and oh, you know, you got to do all these things, gross. But when you buy a house, you're usually just focused on that outcome and how exciting it's going to be to get your new awesome place. And sometimes the transaction can start to feel overwhelming,
Yeah.
you know, so if you can kind of anticipate those needs and those feelings before time, it kind of keeps the emotions, you know, down here so we can
Mm-hmm.
think with our rational brain and not, you know, out of chaos and, you know, whatever might happen when you get
Yeah.
crazy news in real estate. So,
No, that was real good. The emotional part. That was good. A good addition. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Okay, cool. Well, we know not all transactions are gonna go super smooth, Kasey. You gonna have situations where things can get the whole thing just falls apart. Things get pushed back. But let's talk about a situation where the closing day had to be pushed back due to some circumstances you either could or could not control. Can you talk about a situation like that and how you got through it?
Yeah, so I personally haven't made it to like the day before the closing and had to cancel so far,
Oh,
luckily. But it has
yes.
happened on our team a few times, and some of the things were probably preventable. Most of it all goes back to communication, but some of them not so much.
Mm-hmm.
We were scheduling closing once with a gentleman, and it wasn't until we went to schedule the closing did we realize he didn't have a state ID or a license. Um, there's workarounds for that, with notaries and witnesses, but pretty much for home sale, we need a license. So,
Yeah.
the team just got together, figured out how we were going to get him to the Secretary of State, since how he couldn't drive, and got him set up to get his license. Had it mailed to him. Once he got it back, we scheduled closing. So that did push us out about 3 weeks on that one.
Wow.
We'd had gifts not come through last minute, family disputes,
Mm-hmm.
and then the buyers are showing up and they don't have a check, for their down payment, which is just terrible. You just feel terrible because it's, such a bad circumstance to be in. Um, and we went through a lot of education with them on, the certain ways a gift has to be given and recorded and that sort of thing. Um, so that was really unfortunate, but we had great lenders who were able to help us out with that too and say, hey, well, we have option B or C. And that one was only a few days that we had to push that one out. But
All right.
there are things that just happen that are out of your control. And sometimes that's all you can say is we can only deal with what we have control over. The rest we got to
Correct.
let go. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what we need to do and move on because we can't just stay here and be upset, and we just got to keep going.
Yeah, realtors, you are some hustlers. Let me tell you, I've heard so many stories of real estate professionals going above, doing things I wouldn't even think that you could do as a real estate agent,
Yeah.
but you do it, from painting walls to
Hmm.
helping out with babysitting at certain times, taking people to the Secretary of State.
Yep.
Like, you are really trying to, and it's not even just about closing the deal. Some of these things go beyond past the closing date. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? So I love to hear things like that. But more importantly, I love the fact that that's an example of, they say a smart person learns from their mistakes, a wise person learns from mistakes of others.
Yeah.
You say you've noticed things that have happened in your team where that
Yes.
situation happened. You can take that and learn from it to try to prevent yourself from being in that situation. So I want to
Yeah.
applaud you for that, because that's what I took from that story.
Yeah. Thank
Yes,
you.
great. Have you ever come across a property with a unusual background, crazy history? Maybe they shot a movie here, or maybe, a president came to this house or something like. How did you leverage this intriguing aspect to generate interest for potential buyers?
Yeah. Gosh, I hadn't thought of the other potential things. Been to some really cool houses. I
Hmm.
think the bank house still takes the cake with that one. Like that's the one
Okay,
that
I can see
immediately
that.
comes to my mind just because it was a regular functioning bank for a very long time, in the late 1800s until I'm not
Hmm.
sure when, 30s, 50s. Um, and they converted it into a house, and it's just amazing to go in there. They had a lot of documentation. They had service records, business cards like back to the 20s and things that they have kept in the house. So it was just fascinating to be there. And um, the gal that I actually sold that house to had been in the market for a little while, and she really wanted a historic home, like a
Mm.
Victorian or something like that. But she also was trying to be realistic in the fact that she's one person and probably doesn't need like a ginormous 6 bedroom Victorian, something like that. And we had struck out a few times on some different houses, either not meeting needs or the price point just didn't seem to fit type of thing.
Hmm.
And we went and seen this house on a whim, and it checked every box that she had. It was had the old trim, the original windows, the old floors. It had the bank vault, which was unique, and nobody else really has that. It was so well maintained that you couldn't even argue with that. Usually, when you're looking
Right.
at homes from the 1800s, you're like, oh, things have been done, every 10, 20 years, but overall, it's kind of might be a full rental type of thing. And this one was just in great shape,
Yeah.
and it helped a lot that we were there on like a 95-degree day and it was like 70 in the house naturally. It's just like,
Mm.
this is amazing. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but lots of very cool things. And it just, it has all those odd little nuanced things, had a fenced in backyard. Like it couldn't have been any better for her. So it was just unexpected that, we went from looking at historic homes and then next thing you know, we're in a bank.
Yeah.
Made a wonderful house and it was just perfect. So
I would love to see that actually. Now that I think about it, I want to see how that transformed. But that I know that has. I'm gonna be honest. If I have a home like that, I'm checking everything to see what was left. I
yeah,
would love to see. Not even just to keep it, but maybe it can go in a museum or something like that. But
yeah.
I just feel like there has to be something there where it's like, yo, this is intriguing. This is very interesting. So,
Yeah, she still does a lot of research. She has been to like local museums, archives, that kind of
mm.
stuff, just looking for records on the house. And it's just fascinating. And
Oh yeah.
I think that's one of her favorite parts. So,
Yeah, yeah, that'll be nice. That'll be
yeah.
nice. Have you been in a situation where you have to navigate yourself out of a legal or zoning issue with the property?
Um, Kind of, sort of, not really. Mostly because we're rural, so we don't see as many like we don't have to worry as much about variances with like commercial versus ag or residential type of thing. But we have had
Okay.
some different things show up on title work where there was a proposed split without a survey, or those kind
Hmm.
of things that were in transition that we've had to work out. um, Tracking down easements is always fun because some of them are so old that they're not active anymore, but you can't really get them removed either. So just trying to educate the buyer on the fact that there is an easement there for electrical that doesn't exist anymore. The likelihood of them coming out is probably small, but
Right.
that'll be something they would have to address with that utility provider at some point in the future. Those types of things we do see. Quite often, but nothing that's been wild and crazy. I people on the team have dealt with getting like flood zones removed, which is
Hmm.
fascinating and a little beyond my understanding still. But she went through the whole
Right.
process on a home where it was noted to be in a flood zone, but there hadn't been a flood in like more than 100 years or something. So she figured out the process to get that removed, and
Ah.
yeah, so there are things that happen pretty frequently, but they're almost
Okay.
always pretty manageable.
Well, yeah, for sure, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a solution to every problem for the most part. So, if as long as you stay focused, you can find that. But that's crazy that you mentioned it because we got a lot of storms recently here in the Michigan area, and a lot of places are flooded.
Yeah, that we
So,
didn't expect to flood.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking. I feel like we've had this conversation before on the closing table. I was thinking about the fact that what if you're somewhere that it's noted that it doesn't flood, but then for some reason it starts to flood, and you were looking at this property that says it's not in the flood zone. I'm assuming you would have to make some adjustments to that, in the records. And then vice versa. If you're somewhere where it usually does flood, but then it hasn't flooded in, would you say 100 years or
A long
50 years or whatever the case, you get that switched out. So that was kind of interesting to hear that right there because I think I might have heard something like that before, but
Yeah,
nowadays, with it raining or us being getting this type of rain, it's good to see that and see, what homes are in certain zones.
absolutely. And I believe the most up to date map that you can kind of Google and find easily is a FEMA map. You can find
Mm,
like flood zones on there.
good.
Their accuracy isn't 100%, just like anything else online, but it gives you a pretty good estimate. So if you're looking at a house that looks like it's not in the flood zone, but it's real close, that's when you want to make a call to a township or somebody and just like go through the proper channels to find the person that can verify with you one way or another.
Yeah.
But like you said, as we see this week, there's places flooding that are nowhere near a flood zone.
Mm,
You just can't always anticipate it. So
yeah.
check your insurance, know your insurance.
Absolutely. And another thing that I've heard that I found very interesting during this storm was an agent told me they like to go see homes and show homes to their clients when it's raining or when it's like melting snow because it shows where there's any potential leaks and things like cracks in the foundation. I said, oh my God, that is genius. So I'm
Yeah,
thinking like, yo, if you're going to show homes now, like this will be a great time to go see, so you can see if there's any flooding in the basement or leaks in the
100%.
ceiling. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
just wanted to bring that up.
yeah, for sure. I mean, after a storm, a lot of times we will note that there's water in homes that there typically isn't. And 9 times out of 10,
Mm-hmm.
it's the gutters are backed up. So the water's flowing back to the house and not away from it, or something super, super simple.
Yeah.
So we try not to stress out too quickly when it comes to that stuff. But sometimes, yeah, you do see where there's, tiny cracks and things, and water always weeps in, and you wouldn't have known it had it been dry. So,
Exactly,
yep.
exactly. Yeah, you think it's perfect to see this home on this great sunny day, but then you find out when it is raining that it's something you got to fix.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
great perspective. Have you dealt with any difficult or demanding clients in your career, and how did you manage to get through that situation with them?
Yeah, I mean, of course, because it's emotional process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even the most level-headed, calm, loving, kind people, can kind of come ungrounded, I'll say, and lose themselves for a minute. And I mean, it just happens, but we know that it's going to happen. Our best course of action is to expect it, because then you're ready for it. I mean, obviously, we want every deal to go well, but all it takes is a bad day or a bad moment, and something hits you the wrong way. And if you're the bearer of that news, then you're gonna get the repercussions probably. So we just prepare mostly. But yeah, there has been some pretty specific things that have happened in the past, and it really just comes down to kind of being direct. Like, I understand why you feel this way. Very relatable. However,
Yep,
and then
yep.
just kind of go back to whatever backs that up. The purchase agreement states that, they have 5 days after the day of close. So we actually have one more day before you get possession, that type of thing. And, I try really hard not to ever tell anybody that they're wrong. I'm like, no, you're wrong. No, like we don't do that. I'll be
Uh,
like, so yeah, like I understand how you could see it that way. But this is what the contract says, or this is how that typically works, or we have to verify with the lender on that, or just those types of things that kind of keep the conversation moving forward. Obviously validating what the issue is to begin with, but
mm-hmm.
keeping it moving forward, trying to get them out of that emotional mind and into the rational mind, so that they can clearly think and make decisions. So I think the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. So usually if there's an issue, there's information missing. So we're going to give them all the information they
Yeah.
need, help them feel comfortable with what's happening. Because usually it's a loss of control is what triggers that, you know. Um, so we just kind of reel it in, help them feel back in control, give them the information they need, and then get back on to making good decisions.
Yeah. I never thought about that, Kasey, when you said that, but oh man, imagine like your client having a bad day, just one bad day
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of this transaction, and then you call them and say your offer didn't get accepted or something, and you just add right on top of that. They could probably just lash out at you because you're probably like your situation with the transaction of a home is probably the biggest weight on their shoulders. So for you
Yeah.
to add on, they just got a parking ticket. Now you calling to say that the contract fell through. Like, oh my God.
Yes.
So I can literally understand that. Now I love starting to hear these stories and see the different perspectives that you have to go through, because it makes me feel the empathy, if that's the right word, for
Yeah.
your the things that you have to go through, because it is an emotional transaction.
It
So
is. So
yeah.
I like to just let people know that it'll be emotional. It's the most independent people usually at some point get surprised by the emotion more, versus people who kind of live in emotion more regularly. So
Hmm.
my analytical people, I'm usually like, okay, so black and white, this is what this is going to look like. However, I need you to consider that this is
Right.
going to happen and it might make you feel like this. This might happen and it's going to make you feel like that. We're going to ask you a lot of questions. The lender is going to ask you for the same information more than once, and that might be irritating because we already did that once. However, they have to do it to verify. Like just kind of set them up so they know what to expect, and they don't feel that loss of control, or that they're not being listened to because they've already talked about this once.
Mm-hmm.
So that might go back to the nursing stuff too, and like the whole holistic approach.
Yeah,
We're
no, that's a
doing the
good
whole
point.
thing, not just
Yeah.
the transaction. So
That's a good point too. Yeah, audience, please don't take your anger out on the realtors. Please don't do that. I just want to say that. Don't do that, please. They're great people. All right, Kasey, I want to ask you this question to kind of to get some motivation out of us, if that makes sense. What movie, book, quote, philosophy have you ever heard, listened, consumed in your life that kind of helped you and changed you personally or professionally that you can share with us to help change us also, inspire us?
Yeah, so I thought about this a lot. And it was really kind of hard to narrow down to just one thing because I think that different things have a bigger impact at different seasons of life, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but what I kept coming back to in the long run was just the importance of being a lifelong learner. Um, like, there's always something, right? Whether it's,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally or at work or, physically, there's always something that you can know more about. Granted, I don't want you to go learn everything about everything and feel overwhelmed and, not be able to make decisions, but I feel like we all have to figure out what our purpose is. And you figure that out, and then you have to kind of do things to support that purpose, or life doesn't have the fullness, that it could potentially have. So I think learning about what interests you. I know a lot of business owners don't have the opportunity to have a lot of hobbies, but you have to have something, you have to have some boundaries in place where, you could go at work 100%, but still save yourself a little sliver of energy for something that fills you up,
Yeah.
that's super important. So lifelong learner, have some boundaries, whatever that means and looks like for you. And
Mm.
then in my personal life, like I have to have at least one song a day that like hits me in the soul that I can just jam to, and like sometimes that's a whole playlist. And other days I'm just going to listen to that same song, 5 or 10 times until my mind gets right and my mood's back up where I want it to be and I can get on with my day. So I don't know. If all else fails, turn some music on and enjoy your life. Like
Yeah.
it's the best thing you can do.
No, that's some great advice right there. I stand on that too, Kasey. Love that right there. Yeah, always be a lifelong learner,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen. Learn something new every day, no matter how big or small that is. We appreciate those great words, Kasey, and thank you again for pulling up a chair to the closing
Of
table. Thank you
course.
so much. At this point, if you have any last words and or want to tell people how to reach out to you, please do so now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm always available for anyone looking for help. We work in Montcalm, Kent County, pretty much all of West Michigan, all of
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, a lot of times. But you can reach out to me on Facebook. Kasey Heimbecker is my name there. Or any way you can find me, you can find my number online also. Our team is the Christina Rice team. We're out of Gowan. There's 5, almost 6 of us now. We have a full team. We pretty much do it all. We're never going to leave you standing not being able to see a house because someone's going to get you in. So, yeah, if you need anything or have questions, just reach out. Any of us, let us know. We'll help you out.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kasey. We appreciate you again for being here and for our YouTube audience watching right now. If you've gotten to this point in the video, do us both a favor and hit the like button. It looks just like this. Make sure you also share the content and subscribe to our channel, please, and thank you. And if you are listening on Apple, Spotify, or any other podcast platforms, please do the same. Give us a like, a 5-star rating, and subscribe for our latest content. Hey, Kasey, I like to leave our audience with a question before they leave the chat to get their brains, kind of turning a little bit. So, audience, this is for you. Is it a deal breaker for a property to be located near a cemetery? Or what other sites or establishments are deal breakers within proximity of your property? Don't tell us now. Leave it in the comments below. Besides that, we'll talk to you next time.